As Your Heart Betrays You, Part 27, a Miraculous Ladybug Fanfiction written and narrated by Mira Rose, with artwork for the opening and thumbnail image by Evenart Adams on Instagram. You can find Evenart Adams linked in the description box, as well as the prior 26 parts if you haven't heard them already. Don't forget to subscribe, thumbs up this video, and comment claws out to help the YouTube algorithm. Please enjoy As Your Heart Betrays You, Part 27. Adrien Agreste, 23 years old. Cross my heart and swear on Ladybug! Are you Adrien Agreste? Adrien looked up, smiling. I get that a lot. Seriously, Tiffany, why would Adrien Agreste be working in a flower shop? You know management insured his hands for like $5 million or something like that, Tiffany's companion said, rolling her eyes. The girls left, giving Adrien room to breathe. He'd started working at this nursery a month ago, and he loved what he learned here, and the owner loved the business his face brought. Sure, he had to bribe the owner into not using the hashtag Adrien Agreste lookalike on social media, but he wasn't working here for the money. With the exception of young girls who got excited over his striking resemblance to a male celebrity that hadn't been seen in over 6 months, it was peaceful here. Adrien Agreste found his peace. Well, Geppetto found his peace. The nickname stuck, but Adrien couldn't afford to give it up. Hey, Plug. Adrien tossed the keys to his Vespa on the desk as he yanked off his work apron, happy to be home. The days were getting longer, and golden hour was about to bleed through the town. Cheese first! Cheese first! Claws out! The Cat Noir suit wrapped him like a hug. It felt like forever, but he'd done the same thing yesterday. Without so much as closing the patio door behind him, Cat Noir leapt from his terrace, sprinted across the sand, and dove into the ocean. Like a kitten who discovered water and loved it, Cat Noir floated, stomach to the wild, and took in the sea salt air, alone but not lonely. Water lapped at his face. Seagulls screeched. His latest enemy. He'd liked them before they started going after his blueberry bushes. Was this it? Was this where he'd stay forever? A cat in the ocean? He liked that. Did he like that? Did he want that? He wanted that. Adrien kept learning more about what he liked and wanted, or lack thereof. Shaking the water out of his ears, Cat Noir walked across the sand, hosed himself clean, then walked in the house, realizing detransforming would have gotten rid of the water and dirt had he thought of it before he got inside. Oops, next time. Adrien watered his avocado trees, then set to work pruning his bushes. This was it. He liked this. He wanted this. He also wanted something else. This town was quaint, but the only people his age were already married or ghosts. But even if he got a friend group that wasn't 20 years older than him and called him Geppetto, would it still feel right? He wouldn't be able to open up to them about who he was unless he kept his cat persona out of it. It'd be like living in Paris again, except without Starbucks and stalkers. Speaking of Paris, it's about time he paid the city a visit. Sit in a chair for a few days to get yelled at by whoever took care of the Agreste brands in his absence. He had the next few days off at the nursery for the owner's anniversary. If there was ever a time, it was now. "Pack your cheese, Plag." His Kwame looked up from his dollhouse. "Is that code for stuff yourself and I'll go get more?" "You're silly." He was right. They'd swing by Land's cheese in Paris. Adrien didn't bring anything with him, and him walking in after half a year would cause enough of a scene as is. He didn't want to show up in shorts and make people sift through property records of little towns hoping to find his haven. He'd have to swing by Dior or somewhere like that. It's a shame he couldn't ride his Vespa all the way back. Well, he could, but then never mind. Little details. The first half of the journey, he took a train. Night was approaching, and he didn't fancy getting lost as either Adrien or Cat Noir. But once they were just outside the city proper, Adrien slipped into a restroom, transformed, and took off. When a camera flashed, Cat knew Marinette would know he's back in town. It didn't matter. He'd be gone before she'd be able to track him down. As long as news didn't leak about Adrien Agreste, she wouldn't put two and two together. And if she did, so what? It wouldn't change anything. If anything, she'd realized why he left in the first place. He wasn't even in the city proper, and yet he worried about her. Old love really is a vice, isn't it? Cat's feet took him to the mansion he grew up in, as cold as ever. He made the mental note to check on his parents, but headed upstairs. His piano sat in the bedroom, one of the few things he'd kept for himself in this money pit of a building. Someone covered it with a sheet, and he tore it off, then lifted the lid and pressed a key. He'd surely get attention if a light was on in the mansion, so he kept it off and played in the dark. Moonlight Sonata seemed fitting enough, although the third movement didn't play as smoothly as it had in the past. That's what happens when you leave your instruments behind. It was a miracle he remembered as much as he did. In a perfect world, Ladybug would be behind him when he finished, ready to confront the masked man in Adrien Agreste's mansion. In a nightmare land, Ladybug would be behind him when he finished, ready to confront the masked man in Adrien Agreste's mansion. In reality, Cat Noir sat on a piano bench in his childhood bedroom alone. Okay, now he felt lonely. It's interesting how a city can do that to you. Or perhaps it was just this city, or even this building. He missed his avocado trees already. Claws in. Plag didn't need guidance to find the bag Adrien picked up on the way in. Leon might be the only one who knew he was in town right now, and he could keep a secret. He hadn't noticed the tiny village supporting him before now. Had he? To his surprise, the bedding didn't smell of dust and age, and the sunlight kissed him awake the next morning. He slept better than he thought he would. It was a quiet precursor to the havoc he'd wreak doing admin work this afternoon. But unlike the last time he awoke in Paris, Adrien didn't jump into his day. He stretched, thought about where and what plants could decorate this room, and played a few pieces on his piano until the sunlight didn't feel like an early morning greeting. Okay, that should be enough. Time to wreak havoc. Walking past his collection of sunglasses on the way out, Adrien walked through his front door, giving his housekeeper a scare. Oops, it wasn't the first scream he'd hear today, that's for sure. He'd made it 3 whole blocks, a new record, before a shrill scream of excitement touched his ears, and he turned before a stranger could try to touch his hands. He was back. Only for a few days, but it was almost like he'd never left. It's strange how cities can do that. Change so quickly, all while remaining the same. You can't recognize a store, but the bricks are all the same. After handshakes and smiles, Adrien made it to his office. His assistant, a young German, greeted him with a folder of top priorities and no questions. He really was the best he could ask for. His piece lasted an hour before a familiar face rattled through his window, red and spotted with an upset expression. "Where is he?" Adrien looked up to see his partner reaching for his collar. "Hello, Ladybug," he said, sighing as she pulled him chest first over his desk. "I know the two of you are friends. Where did you take him?" It was no use playing innocent in front of her. "A vacation." "You needed to what? Run away and you took my best friend with you? Without giving him a chance to say goodbye?" "You're acting like I catnapped a grown man." "He's always weak to helping people. You took advantage of him." Adrien sighed, tossed the file he was working on into a desk drawer, then laced his fingers in front of his face. "And you never wondered if he left of his own accord?" "He wouldn't do that to me," she quieted, looking away and gripping her elbow after releasing him. "It's good to see you, too." Adrien hesitated. "Marinette." She glared at him as he straightened his desk, waiting to see if she finished her explosion. "Where did you go?" she rasped. "Did you miss me?" Ladybug looked at her feet. "I thought about you." "Did you miss Cat?" Adrien's legs bounced, hidden beneath the desk. "Well, obviously." She let out that little half-laugh scoffing thing she did when she was down. "Why else would I barge into your office like this, foregoing the sea of reporters outside asking for a scoop?" "Because you live with the owner of the Lady Blog, who moved on to report other local news outside of superheroism in the Parisian metropolitan area?" "Don't do that." "Excuse me?" "Don't flash a James Dean smile and dodge questions. I'm not a reporter, Adrien." "Then why am I getting interviewed?" "You... She turned and walked a few paces, throwing her hands in the air. "You're impossible!" Had she always spoken to him like this? "He was in love with you." She stopped short. And? Adrien couldn't help himself. He started laughing as his heart cried. And? That's all? And it wrecked him? For years? Sure, it was his problem, not hers. She even made up a boyfriend because of it, but... And so was I. Her jaw clenched, and he knew it was a low blow. He knew how much she liked him at one point. He hadn't realized how much damage their short relationship gave her until he showed up as Cat Noir to check on her. "You don't get to play that card with me." How did he ache to hold her, even now? He'd moved away. He'd cut her out. He'd moved on, but truth he learned long ago echoed back. Once you truly love someone, a part of you always will. He still did love her, but he'd never let it be like it was before.
Neither do you.
Excuse me?
You're excused. Close the door on your way out.
Adrien turned back to his desk, opening the drawer he'd tossed documents into when the conversation started. He didn't look up for a few minutes and, after what felt like an entire rotation around the sun, he heard her leave, the door clicking softly like a gunshot. That was that. She'd left just in time, because Adrien turned and threw up the drink his assistant prepared, head spinning. Even now, he wanted to run to her. Even now, his head spun with thoughts of how he could accidentally run into her, how he might be able to get another new start, another chapter, another book, another plot line. But that's not how this works. He might not know what was good for him, but at least Adrien knew what wasn't. When did this get so messy? Had it ever not been? Adrien blew air through his teeth, then wiped his mouth with a scrap of paper from the recycling bin. He hadn't expected this to be easy, and he'd expected her to be upset, but he hadn't expected her to show up at his office, all but yelling the second she caught wind he was back in town. She didn't care about him. She only wanted Cat Noir, enough to yell her way past any potential awkwardness with her ex, who outed himself as knowing her secret identity the last time they spoke, or so she thought. He'd made the correct decision 6 months back. From now on, it'd just be him, his Kwamis, and his patio garden. He'd learned he couldn't ask for anything more. Thank you so much for listening. Part 28 is on the way. In the meantime, you can check out these other videos for more fanfiction, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!